This is the state of the nation. Ibifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Ssali. Right. Welcome to the African Alumni Association. This is the state of the nation. My name is Henry Ssali, and before we start, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land for the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is home to many indigenous people from across the Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to serve and work on this land. Welcome to the African Alumni Association. My name is Henry Ssali, and this is the state of the nation. Of course, we continue on our conversation regarding torture in Uganda. This is an important discussion that is not going to end in one show. This time around, I have invited people from the diaspora to talk about torture from their perspective as people in the diaspora. First, their stories on how they ended up coming to the US. Were they inspired by torture in Uganda? Or was it because they just wanted to come around and have a change of scenery? In studio with me is James William Mugenyi, who is medical personnel in the US. He's been practicing there. He practiced in Uganda as well, and an advocate for end torture in Uganda. He has made it his duty to ensure that torture ends in Uganda. I want to thank you for following us. Everyone is following us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn and Facebook. Thank you for following us. Please share, and invite other people to come and engage in this conversation. We think it's an important discussion, and we hope that you have the capacity to share widely. Mr. William Mugenyi, welcome to the State of the Nation once again. This is your second time coming back here, and of course, we are still talking about torture in Uganda. Are you ready for the conversation?
Well, Mr. Ssali, torture is, I don't need to be ready. It's something you wake me up from sleep and I'll talk about it.
I know. So first,
yes.
Introduce yourself.
Yes. James William Mugenyi is my name. I'm a medical clinic officer trained by Ministry of Health in Uganda. And I've been in the trenches. It's a front line. I've been at the front line for over 20 years. I've been practicing at community level. I've practiced at two regional referral hospitals in Bara University Hospital as a clinical instructor. I worked in Mulago Hospital, my initial start. But like I have said, I don't need to be ready to talk about torture. You wake me up and I am able to tell you that there is torture in Uganda. And talking about it, you giving me a platform to talk about it, I think makes me proud. As an advocate of who wants it stopped, I want it stopped. And if we can't stop it, then we must have it addressed. Mr. Ssali, before we go deep into the discussion, there's something that excited me. I hope you have seen it because it has gone viral. It is Stella Nyanzi, who was one of our discussants here, treating Kakwenza Yes, I don't know. It has gone viral. It's all over the world. Stella Nyanzi was helping Kakwenza. Now, Henry, I have a background of TASO. I have worked with the TASO before. In the TASO came as a result of people having no solutions. They were faced with HIV/AIDS. People were dying daily, and then the healthcare system still was not strong enough, or was not living up to what can address HIV at that time. So people who had HIV,
right,
came up and formed an organization called TASO, the AIDS Support Organization, which finally became the hallmark of management of HIV in Uganda. And it is an example for the whole world. There's no other country that started off with something similar to TASO. Most countries adopted what TASO work was. And must I say, I think the founders of TASO, Noreen, is seated in the USA here. So when I saw Kakwenza and Stella Nyanzi, I'm like, whereas that was also something that caused stigma at that time. When you see Stella Nyanzi must go treating the wounds on Kakwenza,
right.
In my mind, I'm like, are we seeing a formation of another TASO? This time it is a torture organization. And it can take that direction, that people who have been tortured, having sought solutions that we are seeking. Just this week, you saw the minister people attempts to censor Jim Mwezi.
Right,
and this is based on torture, and people failed. People have failed to get that. So at the end of the day, the people who are tortured should be thinking, should be innovative enough. And I trust what I saw Stella Nyanzi do. Much as people are laughing at it, throwing all the vulgarities that you can think of, but that's how TASO started. People who have pain coming together. I'm wondering, I think Kakwenza needed a listener. Kakwenza needed somebody to soothe him of those wounds. And I have seen Dr. Lina Zedriga also in Germany. I have now seen Kakwenza, I have seen Lina Zedriga, I have seen Stella Nyanzi together. And then Jackie Oloya. They're all talking about torture. They're in one place. And I'm like, now Kakwenza has formed a team. Why not come up with a torture organization? That is to us here, suggesting for them.
Right. And they had it they had it on the state of the nation, create something new. This time not for the AIDS victim like they did for the with TASO, but this time something for people who have been tortured. People have faced torture, treating themselves. When you say that, you remind me of the Muslim clerics that have faced a lot of torture and to come back to their wives, and they can't even perform their husbandry duties. So maybe when we do have an organization specifically created to cater for torture victims in Uganda, perhaps we can have those discussions also taken care of within that center. We were supposed to have Julius Mitala join us today, but he's unable to join us. He will be joining us in the future, and they will be telling us why you couldn't make it when you were supposed to make it. But Julius is a mental health lawyer. And what you're talking about now makes me think about the mental strength, the mental health of people who have been tortured in Uganda. When they come back, how do they cope with their new realities, their new lives? How do they cope? How do they feel? How do they become, reincorporate themselves within the society that they lived in? How do they have some sort of trust, not just in the system within which they operate, but also within the security forces that are supposed to keep them safe? these are tough conversations, but we must engage with them. Before I proceed, there is a report that was written by the Human Rights Watch it was published in March of 2004. And in their summary, they talk about the sort of chronology of when torture really started in Uganda. And in that very first paragraph, they say that the use of torture as a tool of interrogation is foremost among the escalation in human rights violations by the Ugandan security and military forces since 2001. So for them, they say that this escalation of torture and people seeing that torture is really happening now, recognizing that what Mr. Museveni's government had promised in the 80s was really fraud, or byoya byanso as Baganda would say. That real torture actually started in 2001, and torture victims were usually victims of political suppression. As someone who has been working in the medical area, on the medical field in Uganda and in the US, and someone who is in the diaspora now, what are some of the thoughts you have regarding torture in Uganda? And as someone who lives in the diaspora now, when you look at what happens, are you seeing these activities in the same manner? Do you perceive them the same way that you perceived them when you're in Uganda?
Well,
has your view changed, or is it still the same? Did you actually recognize that it was torture when you're still in Uganda? Or having been in these outside countries?
I think I want to make this statement, and it should be loud and clear. I know more about Uganda now than I knew when I was in Uganda. I don't know whether when I was in Uganda, I took it for granted.
Right.
Because it's like I lived in Uganda then. I knew I woke up every morning and went to hospital and maybe perhaps land on a victim of torture in my work. But right now, it's like every day I wake up to news of torture and I'm like,
right.
Has it worsened, or do we just get bad news from Uganda? It's very difficult to get good news from Uganda. Every morning I wake up, there's something scary about Uganda. And maybe being away has created me, I am more interested about knowing what goes on at home because I'm away. So I tend to receive a lot every morning, every night. I mean, I was in Uganda, but I was never fighting. For example, I was never concerned about children going to the Arab world. I was never concerned. But now every day I'm rescuing somebody in the Arab world, every day. That's something I never did when I was in Uganda. Yet I even knew people who take children there. I knew them. But ever since I came here, now I'm seeing the cries more. And that perhaps is the reason why I'm even talking about torture more, because it's like I have now been given a platform that I lacked. Basically at home, talking about it is also risky. The whole of last week, I've been trying to get my colleagues in the profession. I want us to talk about torture. And they tell you are safe. I think I might need to run very fast into one of the messages I got from a relative. And a my well-placed relative, I would say, so I will not mention his name, but he told me, you're making it difficult for us to pick you from the airport. Can you imagine? And I'm like, but Henry, what if you have listened to me?
Right.
I have not picked a gun. I have simply talked about torture. Right. Now my relative, a well-placed relative who should be able to pick me at the airport, tells me straight away that you are making it very difficult for us to come and pick you from the airport.
Right.
Just because
These are the challenges that we face, people in the diaspora. I have a couple of friends who are either American or Canadian or British or anyone in the diaspora who has acquired a foreign passport that are hesitating to get Ugandan passports, even though they really need them, because they are afraid, almost afraid, that they might be picked up at the airport and be put in house arrest for talking about issues that are not good in Uganda, political issues that point to the government's inconsistencies, right? So some of these people are afraid. You ask them, why don't you go to Uganda yet? Like, I'm going to go to Uganda, but I'm not picking up a Ugandan passport yet. I don't even have Ndagamuntu, even though I really need it and I have property in Uganda and I have stuff or ABCD. I am not doing it because we are being presided over by a dictatorship. We do have a dictatorship in Uganda that does not care about human rights, that is picking up people randomly and taking them to torture chambers, which are supposed to be jails. In custody, they're supposed to be safe custody. When you go to jail, you're supposed to expect some sort of safe custody. But when you go to jail and you get tortured there, you get beaten up, you get decorated, like Mr. Kakwenza was decorated. And of course, so many other Muslim clerics, especially, who were decorated, whose bodies were decorated in Nalufenya and all the other torture chambers that have been happening. You ask yourself, how did we get here? So I'm going to ask you that question. How do you think we got here? Because in 1986 or 1985, whenever Mr. Museveni came to power, this guy was regarded as the hope of Uganda, the new breed of African leaders who were supposed to take Africa to the next level. How did Uganda, the supposed Pearl of Africa, get to the state of pain that Ugandans are experiencing today? And how are we going to end that?
That's a very difficult question to answer, but it's a very difficult answer. I mean, how did we get there? People simply threw away the principles that they declared to work with. Maybe we didn't have checkers for them. But that said, I think it is greed. I would say it is greed for power. It's greed for power. I mean, look at the last election. What explanation do we have for torturing the young people that we are seeing? I mean, the election was marred with violence all through. The campaigns were violent, much as we had COVID-19 being part of the scene at that time. But then COVID-19 was a medical condition. That perhaps the guidelines that would have been used at that time would have come from the medics. And I don't think the medics prescribed torture. I don't think the medics prescribed torture. But somehow the presidential directives, as they were calling them, were reasons for torturing people. And then right now, you can even say, when the whole world is freeing, I mean, we're in the United States where the masks have been eased, people can now move without masks. It is now left to the individual to consider whether they need a mask or not. And this now declared by CDC. But when you go back home in Uganda, the jails, the prisons are full of young people who are said to have broken the presidential guidelines.
Right.
Now, there's a statement, there's something I wanted to mention about torture, which is related to jail. And this comes from an expert who has visited, somebody from the International Committee of the Red Cross, who has visited most of the torture chamber, most jails across the world. And he says the worst scars are in the mind, psychological torture.
Right.
I mean, look at, I think 2 days ago, maybe who would want to know who, because you might think it's only the military that is torturing people. But the judicial system itself is now involved in torture. I mean, if you're talking about in the mind, then look at somebody asking for bail and a judicial officer acts stupid. A judicial officer acts a fool and sends somebody back to jail.
Yeah.
And that's why you're able to see the other young man 2 weeks ago yelling in the military. Yes, that is the psychological scars that are in the minds that we don't see. Because torture, although can be physical, an intense application of pain physically by an authority usually to make you to push you into submission, can also be a sustained application of psychological torture, which we are seeing the judicial system of Uganda using. I mean, government has not yet concluded investigations, and there's no government investigating, you know that. And then you bring around, I mean, when you saw the trade, Segrinya's mother was brought and given 5 million. The wife of Sewanyana brought and given 5 million. Segrinya's wife brought and given 5 million. That is all the whole, you know, people might think it is money, but that's what they want to achieve. That you have lowered the person so much that the person becomes, it's a demeaning thing, that the person now becomes a property.
Right.
Because can Segrinya's mother say no to money? The answer is no. She needs it. That's what Segrinya was supplying, maybe even less than that.
Right.
Was Sewanyana giving the wife that amount of money at once? Maybe no, but that is an achievement now these people have achieved. And that takes a bit of schooling to know that is torture.
So it's dehumanizing.
Your wife now is taken from you and is being used, because by the time somebody is giving your wife money, it tells you your husband is useless.
Right.
That's what it is. It's now telling Segrinya you can't help your wife, we are the one helping. So torture necessarily is supposed to give you false authority over somebody. And that alone is psychological torture, where somebody hand raise of the International Red Cross defined it as the worst scars in the mind. We saw Kakwenza, at least we saw Stella Nyanzi working on the physical scars, but nobody knows on what is going on in Kakwenza's mind. Does he want to fight? Will he fight? By the way, let's not forget about the war in Ukraine. Now it can even make us forget that we are being tortured at home. It has overshadowed everything. And what comes out of Ukraine also, when you see, we are going to have so many prisoners of war. So torture magnified at a certain level again in a certain country. But as medics, in fact, that's what we're supposed to address and tell the world. No, as they are wearing factions, there are human beings in between. Medics take the humanity side of it. I'll not talk about Russia, I'll not talk about Ukraine, but I'll talk about the victims that I have seen. I've seen a child fighting on the street saying, "Why in my country?" That child is questioning an adult. So those are the scars that torture causes. So torture in Uganda has been there. It's an endemic. It has been there for years. There's no single day, no single election that I have not witnessed violence as somebody at the front line or in the outpatient department of hospitals. There's no single day that goes without, during election time, without us receiving a victim of either caning, gunshot wound, whatever maiming that is done during the campaigns.
Right.
That makes me say it's endemic, it's epidemic, endemic means it has stayed within the population for a long time. But when you talk about as an epidemic, it's occurring at abnormal levels for a period of time also.
And it has been happening for a
it has
period
been
of
happening.
time now.
I mean, talk of an election, 2006, I witnessed it.
Right.
2011, I witnessed it because I was still in Uganda. And then in 2016, it got me here. I have kept witnessing it. And then 2021, we saw it. We saw it. And now the Stellanians who are in Germany, perhaps coming up with a task form of organization, a torture organization.
Right.
Maybe one can say, I am discussing this with you because Kakwenza perhaps was the last straw that we needed. You know, you can beat people every day, but you sometimes end up beating the wrong one. Now, to me, I see a lot of silver lining in torturing Kakwenza, that now we are sustaining the discussion that was silent, that some of us have been witnessing in outpatient departments, and we can't talk about them.
You talked about, I want to take you back to the judiciary. You talk about the judiciary and the role, its role in facilitating torture or maintaining it. And of course, we know that Counsel Mabirizi has been, he was arrested for pointing out some of the inconsistencies within the judicial system. He was apparently arrested for I think insulting the judge. There's a legal term that has skipped my mind. But in that report that is dubbed the State of Pain by the Human Rights Watch, they had recommendations to the judiciary, and there were 3 recommendations, and they said that the first recommendation was that use the judicial powers to appoint a judicial agent to visit without prior notice prisons, police stations, military garrisons, and barracks, and any other facility where persons are alleged to be held or treated in violation of their rights by state agents. This is the first recommendation by Human Rights Watch. But they're making a recommendation to the judiciary that is not independent, right? Their second recommendation was that require that each prisoner brought for the first time to the jurisdiction of the court be accompanied by a doctor's report documenting his or a medical condition at the time of detention, and again when the prisoner is first brought to court. That is something that you have experience on. That is something that you're going to talk about. Reports. What influences medical personnel to write those reports? Do they write them in their right minds? If those reports are not consistent with what is happening to the victim. But they also made a third recommendation, and they said that you must require that the state is answering a writ of habeas corpus. I think that's a legal term. Bring the named detainee into the court in the presence of his legal representatives and family. If the detainee is not released, transfer him to prison and require prison authorities to immediately arrange for a medical examination, providing the court and his representative with an expedited, detailed written report of the applicant's condition. So we see a lot of documentation needed or recommended by Human Rights Watch when someone is coming to court. What the judiciary should do, what are some of the duties. Now, they're telling them this for you, in order for you to be effective, these are some of the things you should be doing to curb the state of pain or the state of persecution or torture in Uganda. What are your thoughts about those recommendations? Specifically, the second one, where the medical personnel are required to write a report indicating the health of the victim at the start, before at the beginning of their detention, to the time when they are brought to court. So, in which healthy state were they before they were taken to the detention, and in which healthy state are they when they are brought to court? And of course, we know that in most cases, they take more than 48 hours to bring any kind of victim or prisoner to court, which in itself is a contravention of the constitution of Uganda. So as someone who has worked in the medical field, what are your thoughts on that, specifically in regards to those medical reports and how they arise?
Well, like I explained some time back that the medical reports nowadays are influenced. They are influenced. These forms, as you can see, these forms, as you see, these are forms that medical people fill. Right. When a victim arrives in hospital. Now, these forms have clauses that, if I could be an authority, I would want them removed, especially from the military or from the forces or from authority, so that you leave them independent for medical people to handle and make recommendations as examined. And that said, also, I wanted to, I don't know whether I ever mentioned it last time, that Butabika, the mental facility, was started as a parole center. People don't know why Butabika is in Luzira. It was a parole center. And judicial decisions are usually are supposed to be arrived out at with sound minds. So if you have held somebody in prison and you're going to try them, sometimes they want to admit for the wrong they have not done, if it is going to help them. Because, like, you can plead guilty to be pardoned. That plea sometimes is false. People just plead because they want to be released. And, right. And so when we're talking about judicial decisions and medical, how they interrelate, Butabika was that facility that was basically medical, and a facility that was supposed to be run by mental experts. And strictly, it was for parole. What you call parole, if you want to release James to the community, if you want to take James to court, right, is his sound in mind. Right. Is what James going to say influenced by his detention? What they call moral coercion. You know, people tend to give way. If being locked out, it brings me to, I don't know what the elite sometimes. Yesterday again, there's a video running on Andrew Mwenda. He went to prison and said he liked the posho, he enjoyed the beans, and that is a highly blessed journalist. My dear, that posho is not as sweet and good as it tasted for Andrew Mwenda, for somebody who has been incarcerated innocently. And now you see, right, how, when you get an elite, right, of Andrew Mwenda's caliber to go to prison and be seen eating posho and beans, and he says he had never tasted something as good and sweet like that. No. And that's where we have gone wrong as a country. We have really pushed ourselves to the limit. You know, when you get a journalist of his caliber eating posho and telling the world that he loved it, the issue is the person who has been incarcerated innocently doesn't love that food. He loses the taste of that food. Right. Whereas the prisoners, yes, we are discussing torture. The prisoners are supposed to be tried sound in mind, physically fit, and if a sentence is passed, it's not torture. It's not supposed to be torture. In fact, within last week, I think I saw with Netherlands where people were rushing to go to prison because of the facility, the way it looks like. People wanted to be put in for a month to stay there. But no Ugandan would wish to stay. Yes, those centers are, I think in the US, they're called correction units.
Right.
You're supposed to correct perhaps a behavior that is wrong, not to worsen it. So when a judicial decision is going to be arrived and a sentence passed, that's the punishment. But we are talking about taking somebody, arresting somebody. In fact, people, the debate has been raging on. People even justify that Kakwenza uses the wrong language on people, so let him be tortured. No.
Right.
Kakwenza should be arrested, tried, found guilty, and then given a punishment for what people feel he's guilty of. That's the trend. But you don't pick Kakwenza and pluck off his nails.
No.
That is what we are talking about. That is wrong. Now, the medics, to me, we have our hands also tied, like I mentioned several times. Me who has been practicing in the private practice, when I have this form and I want to correlate or to work with somebody from government hospital, it is hard. It's so hard because I get a torture victim. I am able to describe the torture victim on admission on the day I received them, from their history, and correlating it with the examination and what I see. I come up with the diagnosis. Now, after my conclusion, just getting a stamp from my colleagues in government is a very tough thing, and that tells you how the medics are finding it also difficult, and sometimes forced to write a wrong story
in order to get the stamp.
Yes.
Wow.
To get this, or to get, I mean, there's somebody sometimes who wanted the wrong story written. There's somebody telling you, write this story this way. Because you have heard Kakwenza's story is turning into scars got from an accident.
I know, I saw that. I saw that, and I wondered how that accident was very intentional in decorating Kakwenza on his back, and some of these conversations happen either on Twitter or wherever they do happen, and you ask yourself if we are still living in the same world of rational people having rational discussions. Because when someone says that Kakwenza's scars were a result of an accident, as if that person is addressing people in nursery schools or people in junior primary, you wonder the kind of leaders we have in our country and where we want our country to go in the next 10, 15, 20 years. I wonder what your thoughts are as we continue to interrogate the issue of torture in Uganda. Do you think that most people in the diaspora view torture the same way? Because I know I have a couple of friends who do not even want to talk about issues happening in Uganda because they say, I'm not a politician, that doesn't concern me, until their relatives is thrown in jail or killed while driving a boda, and then they start talking about the inconsistencies in Uganda's government. Well, what are your thoughts? Do you think all Ugandans view the state of pain or the state of persecution in Uganda the same way that you, as an advocate for it, views it or sees it?
Well, maybe there's a statement that best practices. Me and you, perhaps we are now speaking because we are seeing the best practices here.
Right.
And I don't buy the excuse that most people tell us that we're speaking from the diaspora. I mean, if I don't tell you what I'm seeing, I have something to compare. You don't have something to compare. For you, wake up every morning and you are seeing an LODU as an instrument of torture. Me, I wake up in the morning and I'm being encouraged. I'm told it, you have come to the land of the brave. So why not test that?
Right.
What's this? The talk of the land of the brave. I mean, I have spoken in studios in Uganda, radio stations in Uganda, and when I come out, I find another DC.
Right.
As you're in the studio, they tell you the RDC has come. Or as you are speaking, the RDC comes and then he enters studio with a gun. I have been in studios of radios, TVs in Uganda. But now here, I am using my house and nobody will surround it. If I did this in Uganda, somebody will have surrounded it. They will have surrounded my house already. What is he saying?
Right.
So the diaspora, like you're saying, I think the diaspora perspective should be that of what we are doing. Because if they tell you that this is a land of opportunities, this opportunity to speak, why not speak?
Right.
And if this speaking surely is what, again, people telling me at home that you're making it very difficult for us to pick you from the airport. I mean, just look at what we are speaking. Pick out anything that is harmful. But we are simply saying some of these things we are seeing we are from best practices. That's why we speak. That they can be done, that they have been done. There's a trail that if we did it, would have peace at home. And
Right.
now the other aspect that you bring out is that most people here fear to speak, and they fear to speak because now I have my land, I have my family at home, so that again tends to make me not speak because I endanger my family.
Right. Is that,
yes?
Do you think we are also
so that leads to most of the people in the diaspora now, because the diaspora really is a camera. So as you're in the diaspora, what are you speaking?
Right.
Your family is behind. You have had all the debates, how to stifle, how to help to squeeze on our property, and all these things, just because we speak. But what we speak is not war. We simply saying we have seen things different way here. When somebody tells you, welcome to the land of the brave and the free.
Right.
So it is that we try we are trying to free our people. I know that, but it's just to help them know that, yes, there is a free land. There are people who are free somewhere.
Right.
But
do
that
you
should not
think
be where we should be denied? They have gone ahead to think about how to squeeze our remittance to our people. In fact, right now you can't send money in Uganda which is not defined. If you sent money to Uganda, maybe up to a tune of about 2 million, the person who is getting money behind in Uganda is interrogated, and you're like, this is money that you have paid the tax for. It's a money that you are sending into the economy, maybe to pay school fees, but then they are making it harder and harder, and they are not seeing us as people they should instead embrace, because we kind of here to pick from the best practices and deliver it home.
Right.
So the diaspora perspective is shaky, is not clear, depending on how you are viewed as a threat. Because
right.
you have known that in Canada, in USA here where I am, we have now created again that class of the yes. The people who will be here and see a hospital and call it, they describe with everything that is there. They'll tell you, after all, the Americans are also suffering. They say anything.
Right.
They will not want. I mean, I think you have been in this organization. I was representing the Central Plains in UNA.
Right.
This voice that you hear was thrown out of UNA. Was thrown out of UNA simply because the way I speak to you Henry, this is the way I always spoke whenever there was a UNA meeting. I would tell my president in UNA that, can we talk about torture in Uganda? And so if you have an organization that represents Americans here, and that organization cannot talk about torture, then you see that the diaspora perspective also is thinning. And we are allowing it to happen because now, the way Ugandans have been thinned, their space has thinned up. If we don't speak as the diaspora people, we are getting that space also thinned for us. I mean, I can't imagine that I'm here, but every morning I'm fearing. I wake up, it's a good thing that my house or my apartment is wired, cameras all over, as I leave to even inform the system that James is leaving the house. Right. But that's something that we have seen. I mean, look at torture, the way torture here, a policeman here must activate their camera. You know, torture in Uganda is by the military, but here a policeman going to arrest anyone. If a policeman is coming to arrest me in this house, that policeman, if they don't activate their camera and they arrested me, they will have a very hard case against me. So these are some of the things that we are seeing that perhaps we want to land home. I mean, how do you reduce torture? Especially because we have seen victims of torture being killed. Just somebody arresting somebody and they claim he resisted. They kill them and they don't have the only evidence that is there is the person who shot them.
Right. What do you then think about the notion that most leaders in Uganda, especially those in the army, have been sent abroad to learn the art of military? For example, the most recent torture victim, Mr. Kakwenza Rukirabasheja, indicates that his torture was directed by the president's son. But they tell us that the president's son was sent to Sandhurst. He was also sent to the US to learn the art of military. I do not think that those schools teach torture. Why would someone who has gone abroad to study, even some of the judges actually have gone abroad to study and then went back home to serve, why would someone who has been in the diaspora get an opportunity to serve the people back home and continues to perpetuate some of the habits that they would be advising against? Why? Do you think the people in the diaspora are also implicitly tortured and we don't really learn anything from here and do not participate in transferring that knowledge to our nation, to Uganda? What's going on? Why can't we participate in creating real change or transformative leadership in Uganda?
Henry, I'll say there's I think it comes from the musicians that he who pays the piper chooses the tune. I don't know. Is that right? You're normally credited for English. Have I put it right?
Well, it should be right if it's an adage. I'm not sure if it's an adage.
Yes, but the person who pays the piper, the person who plays the flute, if you are the one paying it for that, you choose the tune. Now, it doesn't matter what training people come for here. It doesn't matter what training people come for here, as long as the person who was responsible for that training has a torture mind and they train you and set up even, by the way, look at it this way. If Baryomunsi is a medical doctor, you've heard.
Right.
Baryomunsi is a medical doctor. What language does he speak? You know?
Right.
That tells you a lot. So the state has reduced people so much to that level that if you don't play it or our tune, then we cut off the benefits or the services that because you want to be a minister, then what minister? Is it technical? Are you going to be a true minister? Will you work? Will you uphold what we call ethics in the public sector? You
Right.
can't. You can't. You just can't, because the person who plays your tune, the person who pays you.
Yeah, wants a different tune.
Yes.
So does it help that we even come here to study to learn how things are done in the Western perspective, so that we can customize them to the Ugandan context? Or does it help that we have Ugandans in the diaspora? If most of the Ugandans in the diaspora either can't speak about the issues in Uganda, or they just don't care that some of the leadership in Uganda has been inconsistent in the last 36 years. How do we create awareness within our diaspora communities and encourage them to be outspoken about some of the issues that are going on in Uganda, and how do we normalize having these conversations back home on the ground?
Mr. Henry, the strength in, for example, in a discuss that we are doing, you don't underplay it, because we need these conversations. We need these conversations. You know, the global village that we are into is forcing us to. There are things that we're going to be forced into. I mean, I want somebody to ask, who is this? Who is this talking?
Right.
And somebody should ask, why is Henry talking? What are you talking about? So these conversations are a starter. These are like candles in darkness.
Right.
So we must continue lighting, maintain the fuel in the candles, such that people will finally see the light.
But
to me, keeping quiet
right.
is the worst you can think about. It's like endorsing and signing it. So the diaspora gives us that opportunity, and to me, like I said, just hosting me for the second time is a mileage. And I hope you'll host me and host somebody else. Let's have conversations. Let the world know. Let's speak out. And it's not only the world to know, but that it's at the end of the day, what is your behavior in the village? Because we're simply becoming one village. So communities develop through such. At the end of the day, if we can have a multitude of us who can speak the same language, we'll definitely have influence. Two voices are not enough.
Right. So if we are just having a conversation, and most people have said that words don't matter. The words don't matter, or rather, I think words do not. They hurt. They do not hurt. Ebigambo tebiruma. Words don't hurt. Ebigambo tebiruma. If you're having a conversation, as you say, a simple conversation that is supposed to inform, educate, and create awareness within our communities, in your opinion, why do you think the people that are presiding over the leadership of Uganda, why aren't they engaging in this conversation? Why is it so difficult to get someone from who is serving the government to come on such a platform, a show, and have a mere conversation? These are mere conversations. Why does it become so difficult for people who are presiding over a country to engage in these discussions?
You know, the conversations have been weaponized. They have been weaponized because at the end of the day, me and you are now anti-government, but we want the world, this alone, because Henry, I have not gone home not because I fear, but I have not gone home simply because the prevailing conditions of COVID-19 squeezed us in the world.
Right.
And perhaps it's more of an economical issue. It's
Right.
expensive to travel right now, but me and you should have courage to have this conversation and go home.
But the thing is, I don't think that we are necessarily anti-government. I think we are anti-torture. I think we are anti-corruption. I think we are anti.
That's what I'm saying. They weaponized this conversation, and this is what I'm trying. Me and you should try to diffuse that, because if I'm speaking and somebody says you'll make it hard for us to pick you. So what have I done? It's a mere conversation that Henry, who is not even picking arms, Henry, you're a non-scholar, your CV is out there, and you've said, James, let's talk about torture.
Right.
And then already at home, there's fear. So we need to de-weaponize.
Yeah, but this is what we are doing. When we have these
People
conversations,
must know.
I think we are de-weaponizing these conversations. I think we are making people understand that we are doing the same thing that our ancestors used to do when they sat around the fireplace and talked about issues in the family. The same way we talk about issues in the family is the same way we are going to talk about issues at the village level, at the division level, at the district level, and so on and so on. At the country level, we are having conversations. They shouldn't be expected to be the only ones having conversations in Parliament, where, by the way, dialogue is no longer welcome, because you can't talk about certain things, because if you're talking about certain things, they're not going to give you the floor. So why is it so difficult for people to engage in a conversation, disagree or agree to disagree, but then continue to be civil and continue to be brothers and sisters and continue to be citizens or comrades in the same country, disagreeing on certain ideological values, but also ensuring that the vices that are deterring the growth of our country are eliminated. Vices like torture, the torturing of victims, refusing to take people who have been arrested to court within the prescribed time that the Constitution provides. The corruption, the rampant corruption. As you know, that they were trying, the opposition MPs were trying to build a censure motion for Jim Muhwezi, but Mr. Jim Muhwezi has not been censored or tried to be censored for the first time. You remember, the history tells us that he was once censored and kicked out of Parliament. So he's the same guy coming back, and he's the same guy in hot water, and he's the same guy dismissing the notion that torture actually happens. He says he does not believe in it, but he does not proceed to question if it really happened, or even suggest creating an ad hoc committee to investigate if everything that has been appearing in the media, things that have led to his person being pursued by his fellow members of Parliament, to be thrown out of his position, why hasn't Jim Muhwezi, in his capacity, requested or advocated for a creation of an ad hoc committee to investigate the tortures in Uganda?
And this is his own statement. I want to read. I have it here. He says, security, okay, this is security, it's being quoted by NTV Uganda, maintains that government does not condone torture and says he cannot be personally be held liable for mistakes committed by individual security personnel. That's Jim Muhwezi. Mm-hmm. And he says no case of torture has been proven, so there's no cause of alarm. That's the minister. Now, it brings us to the whole conversation that we have been having. No case has been proven. So who proves the case?
Yeah.
Who proves the case? And now it brings back again the whole conversation, the medics. And then it goes back, can the medics prove these cases? And how do you empower the medics to do these cases? How do you empower somebody like me who sits in the outpatient department to say, yes, I have received Kakwenza?
Right. And he's in his state.
Yes, history of torture. The presenting complaint was, I was beaten. Beaten by who? By soldiers. And then on examination, yes, there are torture marks.
Right.
Further investigation shows, yes, there are serious bodily harm. It's bodily harm. And you're writing those things down now. Who holds the person who holds the stamp? I mean, where does this history disappear? Where does this history disappear that the clinic officers who are by their frontliners in primary healthcare, they're in every outpatient department. Nobody is tortured and doesn't pass through their hands. So how do you empower this over 10? By the way, there are over 10,000 prescribers seated doing this.
Right.
How do we empower? Where does this history disappear and it turns into Kakwenza had a road accident? And still, if Kakwenza had a road accident, did we get a report that he was involved in a road traffic accident anywhere? If he wasn't, then how do we get? I mean, these are the issues, established values that now we need. That the community, it takes the doctors, it takes the lawyers, it takes everyone. Because yes, we are not, and let's put it clear here that if Kakwenza made a mistake, which we all agree, if he made a mistake, he abused, maybe it was sin. So all of us, even the public, is expectant. How can Kakwenza abuse Muhoozi? So the public is expectant. Now the public expects you to do the right action. And that's what we are asking for. Do the right thing, arrest him, put him before court. But you have arrested him and he can't even appear in court because he has been maimed. He has been tortured.
And when he appears in court at 8:30 a.m. when court is supposed to start at 9. Appears in court at 8:30 a.m. with 2 prosecutors and a judge, and is thrown into jail again without even his counsel in his presence. What kind of country are we building for our children, for our grandchildren, and for the generations to come? Is this what we want Uganda to look like in 40 years to come? And if not, why are we so comfortable with the inconsistencies that are being perpetuated by the leaders of Uganda right now? What do we do to educate them? Because education doesn't end. We all learn. We are all students of life, right? We continue to learn every day from each other, from our mistakes, and from other people's perceptions of our world. Why is it so hard for leaders in Uganda to engage in these conversations without necessarily insulting each other in one way or another? Because last week, the whole of last week, I think I've been seeing the Honorable Norbert Mao, the president for DP, the President General for DP, engaging in some kind of hot conversation with other political leaders to the extent that they have even started insulting each other. Is this a kind of leadership? Because when we're having these conversations, I want us to evaluate actors, political actors in Uganda, not just NRM politicians, but also the opposition politicians, whether they are in DP or NUP or FDC, their behavior. How does their behavior contribute to how people engage in political activities in Uganda? Because if we do have a dysfunctional opposition, can we expect to have a functional government when that opposition becomes the government?
Henry, I think let me just put it this way. I think there's some very important point that you bring out, and again, there's sometimes look at the face you have put on torture. I'm a medic, and I'm telling the world that torture is wrong. Let's get those faces. And then that said, Henry, I have been yearning and crying for people to occupy these spaces. Henry, you have occupied me now maybe for 30, I don't know how long, but I saw Nsereko. Okay, Nsereko, key people in Uganda now, they're talking about controlling what people say. But Henry, me and you have been here. We've been here. And this is something I've been campaigning for. Come, let's go to the social media and occupy young people. Now they say the younger people have, there's a way they put it, that they are terrorists there. Henry, maybe, I don't know, maybe the next time, I don't know whether it is even possible, open up studio lines. Because why are we not, somebody must occupy this space with good information. Right. Something that you've done. You have called me, and it's not weaponized. It's not. We are simply saying no to torture. But the people who want to torture people will say, close the space.
Don't have this conversation, yeah.
Yes, close the space. Make sure, I didn't understand why Nsereko was, that level of debate that resulted into almost a studio fight between him and Semakade, lawyer Semakade. And so the issue is, go out there and occupy that space where the young people are simply a mirror. I mean, if you have been involved in torturing people, if you are corrupt, if you have murdered people, what do you expect a young person to come out and say?
Right.
The young person should come out and use a language that fits a murderer. The young person should come out and use a language that fits a corrupt person. The young person should come out and speak a language that fits somebody who tortures people.
Yeah. Do you think this is a result of suppressing speech in Uganda, suppressing conversations like these ones in Uganda? Do you think that people are so fed up right now that the only way they have to express themselves is through insults, even when they would have engaged in civil conversations like this one?
Yes, it is like you put water in and put a piston and push on the piston, water finds its way.
Right.
You are simply seeing anger. We need to diffuse anger in the young people. And we can only do that by coming and being true. Being true. If I'm saying I'm a medic, I should be a medic. I should not be the medic who is going to cover torture. And the young people need to see, I mean, those role models, those examples. And you bring in still something I was telling people that, when you come up as political parties, which something I have seen about 2-3 weeks ago, or 2 weeks, Norbert Mao has sworn to fight NUP for 2 years. So these kids that don't have, they want a role model. Right. And I am not going to say, I am here to say Chagulanyi, but he stood up. Nobody prepared them politically. If we have, okay, who comes out from Changkwanzi, where are they? People who come out from Samizi Leadership Institute, where are they? People, you need these people. So you have if you created hooligans, and you don't have anything for them,
how do you expect diplomats?
You don't have to ask for a vote for them. They are not, these young people cannot suit in any political party. They don't suit in. So you need to create So when you are there as a leader and you expect nobody can talk to my level, but you can talk to a child from Kamocha.
Right.
Me and you shall listen to nobody because there are issues to discuss. But you are talking to a jobless person, somebody who has been trained, because some of them are now in Saudi Arabia, and when they come back and you want them to give you a vote. I am identified right now with kids in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
To the extent that I'm now trying to form an organization that is going to oversee, and I'm pushing this every day. And I don't see any politician. No, but Mao, if I told you there are kids in Saudi Arabia, put your face together with mine so that the kids can see it. And they see that you are fighting to help them. This is something we're not doing.
Do you think these are some of the gaps that should have covered in the last 36 years?
Yes.
Is it the lack of mentorship within the opposition leadership, or is it just poverty that has led us to where we are today? Can we raise up a generational moral leader? Can we raise a moral generation that will take Uganda to the next level if we are not providing the essential ingredients that can create that leadership, namely mentorship programs and other things that come along with such expectations?
The answer is definitely yes. I mean, look at somebody goes to Saudi Arabia at 21 years and they are starved in Saudi Arabia and they are beaten in Saudi Arabia, and you expect them to come back and say they are voting you. That's how bad it is. That 1,000 people going to Saudi Arabia, not as a mentorship program from the state. These are people who are going out as desperate people.
Yeah.
And you expect them to come back and have clean language. And most of the language that you are, by the most of the language on social media, at home you have controlled it, but it is in Saudi Arabia, it's in Dubai, it's that's where they are speaking from.
Right.
And that's when you bring in the diaspora aspect, that is where I'm speaking from.
Right.
Now you want to know that James, who went to USA, how did he go there? And perhaps what can James tell the rest of Ugandans? You are lucky that you are talking to a James who was mentored. If I told you a bit of my history, I was a national athlete.
Right.
When I left Tororo as a Bank of Uganda athlete. Being a Bank of Uganda athlete was a mentoring program.
Right.
Being an athlete for coffee was a mentoring program. Being an athlete for post office was a mentoring program. Now, hardly had I run for Bank of Uganda, whatever you call them, there were policies, maybe IMF policies, whatever you call them, these clubs, all sports clubs that Uganda Commercial Bank had, Post Office had, Bank of Uganda, me who was a Bank of Uganda athlete, I was thrown out.
Right.
And yet you'd expect that James, perhaps as an athlete for Bank of Uganda, would have finally ended up as a banker. So those programs are missing. So
do you think this is a deliberate move by the presiding government to break down the spirit of Ugandans?
It worked for some time. Make them poor.
Right.
It worked for some time. Make them poor. And then give them handouts. But at the end of the day, it is not working out, because at the end of the day, the poor person is a taxpayer.
Right.
It is not coming back. The person whom you are squeezing is a taxpayer. Henry, me and you, without paying taxes, I mean, I think what qualifies us here is the ability to pay taxes.
Right.
Our credit worthiness is what makes us to be here. So
Right.
if you have a collection of people who are poor and you start coming up with even programs now, we moved from whatever programs, I mean, I've been in series of them, none of them works. Now we have a parish model. Those
Right.
programs must be real. And Henry, to me, any investment worth investment in Uganda must have a youth program. Any
Right.
investment worth an investment in Uganda must have a youth program. I'm talking from principle that I grew up, I was mentored. That if you had UCI, Uganda Cement Industry, it
Yeah,
had Uganda.
let us come back so that
Yes.
we're gonna go for a 1 minute break. When we come back, we should talk about what we need to do in order to eliminate some of these inconsistencies that are lagging us behind and perhaps leading to the Turkey in Uganda. If you're following us on YouTube, please follow us so that you can be able to follow this conversation whenever it is happening. If you're following us on Facebook, thank you so much. If you're following us on Twitter, thank you so much. Share, like, and comment. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the comment section, or you can actually message me directly. Again, thank you so much for following us. This is the State of the Nation.
This is the State of the Nation. Rifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The State of the Nation with Henry Ssali.
We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. All deliberate words, intentional words, to make you understand that this conversation is for everyone who is encouraged or who feels like they should be engaging in a constructive conversation to build our country, to build our nation. Uganda yaffe ffenna n'olw'ensonga eyo buli omu akubirizibwa okukola ky'alina okukola mu buntu bwe ye nga bw'ali in their capacity okutereeza eggwanga lyaffe. We should not continue blaming the people who are leading us poorly without engaging ourselves in the affairs of our country. It's very important. Gwe ali eyo ng'olaba Uganda yandibadde esingako okubeera w'eri. Okozeewo ekyo gifuula ekyo ky'oyagala ebeere. At some point, Uganda and Singapore were at the same economic rate of growth. Today, when you look at Singapore and compare it to Uganda, you would wonder how Singapore got where it is, even though Singapore itself has some traces of dictatorship. But there is development that has been happening on a regular basis. So gwe muganda wange gwe mwanyinaze tulaba olwaleero, first of all, yagala Facebook oba yagala YouTube, like, join us. We want more of you to engage in this conversation, because it is important that you engage in this conversation. This is our country. The only way we are going to be able to elevate our country, to make it a better place, not just for ourselves, for our old selves, because most people in the diaspora, we sit here and say that, mwana, nze kandeke bannayuganda bagira bakolaki bayiriba bwenakaddiwanga ngenda mbeerayo for retirement. We think we are going to go back to Uganda to retire. I want to challenge you, my friend, that if you want to retire in a good place, in a Florida like Uganda, you have to start speaking life into that space that you want to occupy when you're 70, when you're 65, when you're 80 years. old. Do not sit here and wait for Ugandans to fix what is wrong without your help. They need you and you need them. If not now, in 30 years when you decide that you want to go back to Uganda. As I encouraged you earlier, please share your thoughts, share your comments. If you have any question, let us engage in this conversation together. This is a conversation for all of us. Stand Up Uganda. Stand Up Uganda says, end torture in Uganda. Stop police brutality in Uganda. Stop Museveni. That is end torture in Uganda. You can definitely see that it is some kind of frustrated with how things are going. We stand with all Ugandans who feel frustrated, and we encourage you to speak up. You do not have to be abusive, but you must be assertive. You must be deliberate. You must be honest in these conversations. Do not just attack the people in government, but also keep opposition leaders accountable. When they tell you this is what we are going to do, keep them accountable. And I think ensi yaffe egenda kutereera nga twize okunyumyamu n'abakulembeze abatutwala, whether they are in the opposition or in government. It is our duty as citizens. We cannot empower our constitution if we haven't had that courage to empower ourselves to have these conversations. In studio with me is Mr. James William Mugenyi, a medical officer in the US, medical health officer in the US. Welcome back, Mr. Mugenyi. How do we fix the inconsistencies in Uganda that have led to numerous people being tortured in prison chambers and the so-called self-custody jails?
Henry, I think that, yes.
You were talking about mentorship programs earlier.
Mentorship programs.
And some of the things that were eliminated.
Yes. It's like the youth spaces are not there. The youth spaces are not there. And now all youths are looking at politics. Because like I mentioned, if you bought the stadium, land for a stadium, like in Tororo, where I come from,
right,
the stadium land was given to an investor, and an investor gave us nothing in return. And a stadium is basically a youth space. When you're talking about land for a park, that is a youth space. Now, these young people don't have spaces to fit in. Ugandan youth, basically, perhaps the space they have is school. And some of the schools right now, if you went to most of these schools, if I told you that I was an athlete for the country, I'll give you an example. We had what we call the all-girls competition.
Right.
I competed in the all-boys competitions. So where are the all-boys competitions? Where are they? What happened what happened so that these all boys competitions were removed? What happened to the all? Yes, what happened to the all girls competitions? The last all girls competition I saw was in Toro Girls. All girls in the country coming to compete. This was removed. So you are having young people who are jumping steps in growth. And then they're coming to meet you politicians now. Now, just because you have an advantage, for you think the best to do is to have a gun to stop them.
Right.
I mean, just look at the torture trail. The people who are being tortured are young people. And calling them now rebels, calling them terrorists. I, who was a young person, especially who grew through youth programs, I feel hard. That's why sometimes I'm so passionate about it. I grew through youth programs. Henry, if I told you, you can't believe it. I'm sure you must have heard of Postnet or Money. goalkeeper for Uganda
Right.
after before Onyango.
Right.
President Omoni was my goalkeeper, a youth program.
Interesting.
In Fort Portal. I'm sure he's
Right.
listening. He's in South Africa. He can tell you that.
Right.
And if I knew I was coming for this, I can give you the list of names of people whom I have mentored. When I was in Mbarara University, I had a sports club in Mbarara. The last sports club I had in Tororo, fighting with the people of Tororo after over stadium land, was called Femme Athletics Club. And if I told you, I mean, even the Kenyans can tell you, I'm one of the fathers of modern sprinting, and Kenya now presents the person sprinting at world level. When I had sprinters, young people from Tororo, beating Kenya in all their competitions, from Tororo, Kisumu, up to Mombasa, up to national championship. The Kenyans never used to beat us in 400 and 100 meters, and yet I was a club in Tororo. So these programs, when I was in Jinja, recently, my last station before I came to USA, I had a young people's program, and I am a health worker. So when you go to studio and you engage in verbal attacks, you're engaging young people in verbal attacks, you're only creating room for war. And then for you have an advantage because all the youth spaces you took over. And then, by the way, government now has a youth program that government has. People join. When they said 30,000 have joined LODU, that happened during the COVID-19 period. 10,000 joined LODU. Within that 2 years of COVID, we have recruited over 50,000 young people as local defense units.
Right.
That is crime. That is preparing them for violence. And now when you're talking about torture, the torture that we are seeing, it is because you have so many instruments of torture. Very many young people have guns. Very many young people can pick the sticks for caning people. So you need to diffuse that, and that takes a nation. It is going to take a nation. Because now me who speaks, there's a young man who thinks I should be caned.
Right.
Which is wrong.
Yeah.
There's a young man who has now been trained to wait for James to be caned.
Yeah.
And now, if we're not taking them into this militarization where we're looking at making them politicians.
Yeah.
Yes, people come up and say that Bobby Wine or whatever they say. I've heard, I've listened, and I want this got clearly. People come out and say Bobby Wine is not yes, nobody came out 2 days ago. He said he should not have been registered because he doesn't even know politics. He doesn't know politics. Yes, he was a musician, but he has occupied space because
there's no leadership.
There's no leadership. And he's appealing to these young people that you don't tell them about DP, don't tell them about UPC. They are in Saudi Arabia. They want to be rescued from Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So you don't have those programs. All you have is pick them up. If they come to stand against you, lock them. All you have, pick them up, pluck nails from them. All you have, pick them, feed them to crocodiles. Come on. I have never seen a nation that doesn't have a program for young people other than killing them. That's terrible. So I was giving you those examples. James talks of as an athlete of Bank of Uganda. Which athletes now in Uganda? Who can talk of as an athlete of Bank of Uganda? Bank of Uganda is still there, but so where is the program that they had for youths? Uganda Commercial Bank, sorry, that one disappeared. But whatever came, Stanbic, where is the program from Stanbic for young people that we had?
Yeah.
Post office is now Uganda Telecoms. Where are the programs they had for young people? Because as a Bank of Uganda athlete, I would compete against tobacco athletes. I would compete against Uganda Commercial Bank athletes. And that's how we formed the national teams. So where are they? These programs...
Do you think there's no philanthropy within these companies now, these big corporations, do they not care about the public, giving back to the public? Because the public facilitates them by giving them the trust to bank their money, to take care of their other services or needs. The public is trusting them. What should corporations in Uganda do to give back to the public?
Before I even speak so much, you see what I'm putting on? This is track and field Drake University. Drake University. Right. And do you know who sponsors sports at Drake University? Adidas. This is Drake University uniform I'm putting on. I have been a volunteer coach at Drake University.
Yeah.
So cite out any example like this, that James is now in the United States as a Drake University volunteer, but absolutely. Adidas sponsors, and you know how it's an apparel industry. So you go back to Uganda, we are talking about these investments. We gave them, for example, if I talked about use TCI, where is the field that the current TCI found in Tororo? If I talk about phosphates, which was TCAF, where is the sports field that TCAF found? I mean, phosphates TCAF had. If I talk about UTRO, Uganda Trypanosomiasis Research Organization, is now narrow. Last week we saw their school, the primary school that was there as a corporate social responsibility, has collapsed. Now the primary children, the young kids are now learning in the offices of NARO. So these small things are things that created the communities that we are yearning for.
Right.
We destroyed this, and now the young people only know they belong to a parent, and if they are poor, then they can't raise up the young person. The young person is about it takes a community, it takes the world to raise up the person.
And then you have teenagers who are also becoming parents.
Yes, I'm speaking this language simply because I had an opportunity for mentorship. And it is not there. So all we have now is LODUs. That program stands out in Uganda very clearly. And these LODUs will beat anyone. They beat doctors during COVID-19.
Right.
And to tell you the truth, and that's why I'm saying I'm courageous. I'm speaking because I am identifying myself as a medic. If I went to Uganda and somebody tortured me, or somebody thinks they should pick me because James is speaking, you're picking a medic. We have that immunity.
Yeah. Do we know if the people who train these security personnel or military personnel, do we know that these people go through a sensitization program whereby they are taught how to behave in public, how to behave with civilian people, how to deal with how to handle arrests or conduct respectful arrests? We know if these security personnel go through any sort of equity training or sensitization training.
Henry, but maybe you are forgetting. I mean, there's something you have not. You're picking a hooligan, because that's how we call them. Those who are not having guns are called hooligans.
Right.
So you're picking a hooligan and arming a hooligan with a gun. That's what we're doing. Right. Because those who don't have guns are called hooligans. So if you're going to arm a hooligan, because that's the space you create, they come in, pick the guns. And what do you see? The torture that we are talking about, that is now endemic, that's is an epidemic, is coming from these unmentored young people. So necessarily the people who are torturing us, if you want to put it this way, they are part of the community. We recruit from them. They are recruited from us.
Right.
They are simply made advantaged. That's what I can say. And the advantage is you give them a gun, and empower them with little power, they call it power, and unleash them to the rest.
Right.
So it's not a one-day thing. It is going to take this. It's going to take us to speak about it, as we want to stop torture. Yes, the formations like we have seen Stella and Kakwenza. Yes, those formations are also very important, but still, the core issues must be addressed.
And that's why I wanted.
Yes,
I wanted to ask, who should be the stakeholders in this conversation? Because it seems the people who we think must be the stakeholders are not willing to come forward and have these conversations. Who are some of the potential stakeholders in having this conversation? Because if we want something to end, we must engage serious stakeholders, similar to what was done for the AIDS scourge in Uganda. Right now, Uganda is regarded as one of the countries that has managed the AIDS pandemic very well. How do we engage people in these conversations? Who are those people that we should engage in this conversation? Because I don't want us to have a conversation about torture for 2 hours or 4 hours and then forget about everything that we have talked about. So I want action-oriented pointers. How do we move forward with the stakeholders, and how do we engage them in a meaningful conversation?
Henry, the conversation has to take, maybe let me give you, I usually like to use public health knowledge. There's what we call an equilateral triangle for actions, right. Where if an equilateral triangle, if you drew it, if I had a pen, I would draw it for you here. If I had a marker, on top you have political will on top. On this side, you have sectors, intersectoral collaboration. On this high side, intersectoral collaboration with appropriate technology.
Right.
And then on this side, you have community participation and involvement.
What you are drawing is a conceptual framework.
Yes, it's a triangle.
Right.
The political will itself is not there, you know it. It's not there. Now getting sectors, because now if I told you in appropriateness of technology and then the sectors collaborating, I was a student. Bank of Uganda takes over me. Just look at that connection. Bank of Uganda, what was a student, because the student has talent, it becomes a Bank of Uganda kind of property.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yes, the communities participating and getting involved. We just can't avoid getting involved, whether in the diaspora, whether at home. These things must come into interplay. And the political will itself is zero.
Right.
Is there anyone who wants this solution? Or we're just using it as a tool of administration? Because is there anybody who wants to stop torture in Uganda, like me and you are passionate about it? If they are passionate, if there's that passion, then let's see it.
Right.
Because you are not going to solve minus diagonizing the problem. We must bring it out.
My friend Chris Namakola has a message for us. He says, before you even talk about the curriculum of training, let's talk about the foundation. What is the intention of this recruitment? Not to serve the population. The intentions are to serve the people in power, or the people that powers that be. Therefore, the training entails identifying those who are politically incorrect and teach them lesson. That, my friend, is the basis of LDU security training. What are your thoughts on his submission? You know Chris Namakola? No, Chris, right?
No, it sounds a familiar name. Maybe Yeah, but yes, he has a point. He has a point. I mean, we don't agree first in principle that we need LODUs. Somebody just trains them because he knows they'll sustain him in power.
Right.
These LODUs are recruited and they are told that they're going to secure us, which they don't. They're just instruments of torture. Right. We can do with LODUs. These LODUs are more en masse recruited during elections. They come in to protect votes. That's what they tell you. And then you have recruited them, you don't have an outlet for them. I wish, to me, if I was to manage that LODU program, if it is anything, then I would use it for mentoring, for mentorship. That in the near future, from LODUs, let's have medics coming out of them. Right. I mean, look at Henry. Let's look at why do people join the USC in the forces? Anybody who wants to advance academically, because of the expenses in education here, people join the forces. They join the forces, serve for 2 or 5 years, and then they are assured of scholarship.
Okay.
So can we use the LODUs perhaps? I mean, at the end of the day, there must be this good conversation that people who see LODUs, so you have recruited them, we have identified them, yes, but what skilling? Why only skill them in killing? Yeah, because at the moment the skill the LODUs have is that one of killing. So if you recruited LODUs 30,000, why not say we are going to see 10,000 doctors or 10,000 engineers or whatever coming out of them?
But you indicated earlier that these people are recruited within ourselves. They are among us. They are part of the community within which we live. They are us. These LDUs are us. These security personnel are us. Why then do they turn against us?
That
torture us without regard.
Yes, this is a training. You know, it's to kill is a training. To become a medic, you are trained. When I'm recruited as a medic, the first time I see anybody dead, in fact, I fainted when I entered the theater. The first time I fainted when I saw somebody being slit. I fainted. So you're trained. So these people are recruited from us. Actually, sometimes they say, yes, this can be a violent community. We need it.
Right.
And then if somebody takes advantage of the violence in me, they give me a gun and then make me special.
Special. Make you special. In quotes. This is the state of the nation. If you're following us, please share, comment, subscribe. YouTube subscribing or Silike. If you are on Facebook, share with your friends, tag someone that you would like to hear this conversation, comment, tell us what your thoughts are, ask questions if you have any questions. We have about 10 minutes to go. So if you have any questions, if you want to add to this conversation, this is your space. Engage. Let us engage in this conversation in Uganda. And we encourage you to be involved, to have these conversations. Sometimes they are tough conversations, but needed nonetheless. Let us.
And Henry, don't put a disclaimer on this one. Because when you put disclaimers, then we are not conversing. We are talking the truth. We are talking the truth as Ugandans. And we have not accused anyone. We are simply saying what solutions for torture. And
right.
I'm giving. I wouldn't like to see a disclaimer on this one.
Okay.
We are owning it. Me and we are owning it. We are saying, how do we stop torture in Uganda? I have given you a medical perspective. I have been there. Yes.
Yeah, of course. We are always here to create space for conversations. We invite anyone who is interested in having a conversation, anyone who claims to love Uganda, whether you are within the leadership or not, but you live in Uganda and you carry some sort of Ugandan connections, you are invited to have this conversation. This is a conversation about torture and how it can be eliminated in Uganda, so that we can have a better country for us, for our children, and for our ancestors. Before we close, why don't we talk about the conflict in Europe, Russia, Ukraine? Your thoughts. It doesn't have to be for or against any, but your fair assessment of how you see the events.
The human cost is terrible. I have seen bodies littered on the roads. The human cost is terrible. And these are things that maybe I have seen even people say that why not discuss Uganda? Why do we discuss things that are beyond us? But the issue is, where is civilization? Where is civilization? I mean, why didn't we think of, I mean, to me, from COVID-19, I discovered we didn't have the world. We didn't have a world from COVID-19. I was in the United States here, and I kept on telling people in the United States, and if the Americans are listening to me, I've been telling them that you people in America, the first thing you needed to do was to close the distance, to close the social distance. The disease has come where you need to open up, where you need to close. I mean, I was saying closing in America, it means come together. You should come together. This is a disease that required all of us involved, and it found America. By the way, it has been grave here because we're a torn community. We're a community that is torn between those who have and those who don't have. People like us who are in the immigration status or who are refugees, we just didn't have any hospital to go to.
Right.
And then I was like, look here. I fought Ebola. In my country.
Yeah.
And when I came here and you're telling me that my papers or my don't translate. So
right.
you have this world that requires. You have this world that requires to listen. And it's very unfortunate that we are going to listen to Russia because they have big guns. Look at the human cost of not listening. Because now, yes, there are warring factions, but the whole thing that there are people who have been communicating about this thing. They communicated and nobody listened. We communicated to each other and nobody listened until now we have reached the battlefront.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a painful thing seeing what is happening, and I'm also worried. I'm worried that because this is now affecting us. And the other day, I think, yes, if Twitter is a space for us to communicate, I've communicated to the United States and the ambassador and the president and everybody. I told them, you people are posing now with our president. And if it was just a matter of choice, for the last two presidents, President Museveni has not shaken hands with any president in the United States. Instead, he has shaken hands with Putin. Right now, we are the only ones who have a force that can do intercontinental work. If you given us an opportunity, I know where we would go. Would fight for Russia. But that said, Henry, for the last since 2011 elections, I have witnessed Ugandans demonstrating at UN, Washington. I have witnessed, even last week, there were Ugandans calling out IMF to stop funding Uganda. And the reason is torture.
Right.
All the demonstrations that we are holding in America, or that are being held in America, are about torture. People telling the United States, listen to us. We are giving money to Uganda, and the money simply funds torture. Before I saw the picture of bodies in Ukraine on the road, last week I had seen people slaughtered like hens, like chicken in Congo.
Right.
Horrible images of people without heads thrown, the other thrown, and you see bodies, bodies without heads.
Headless bodies.
Headless bodies.
Right.
Now, this thing overshadows Africa, which hurts all of us because we're now talking about this. How do we fit in this village? All of us.
Right.
That's my take. That's my take, Henry.
Yeah. That's a very good question. How do we fit into this global village? Who is regarded worthy of talking about and who is worthless? You have cited the bodies in Congo, but of course it's not just Congo. There are other countries that have been going through conflicts in Africa. Of course, we could also talk about Afghanistan, which is trying to get back to stability now. We don't know how much stability it's going to have with the Taliban in charge, but I guess time will tell. And then one of the fundamental questions right now people are grappling with is why is Ukraine alone in this when for so many months they have been having conversations regarding EU, whether to become a member or not, with all other stakeholders who are now just talking about sanctions. Where are they on the ground? People are also wondering if some international organizations are going to be allowed into Ukraine, organizations like the Red Cross or the World Food Program, because now people are going to need food. People are going to need medical personnel to take care of them on the war. How do such organizations engage in such a circumstances of a hot war between Russia and Ukraine? And how do you justify the refusal of EU actors, main actors, for failing to mitigate this before it happened into full-scale hot war? These are conversations that we can have. So some we do have some sort of influence to bring forward and talk about, specifically in Uganda's context. When it becomes a global crisis, it becomes more complicated, and we need to question not just ourselves, but also the people that we have been following for many years, and the role of NATO, really, because we thought NATO would be in position to fend off any kind of aggression, and if it has not been able to do so, you wonder where the world, the global village, as you call it, where it's heading. My friend, why don't you wrap up regarding the torture in Uganda and what the role of the diaspora Ugandans should be in stopping torture in Uganda?
No, Henry, the conversations must continue. There's torture in Uganda. The good thing that everybody has denied, from the president, the ministers, to all security agencies, they have denied that they don't do it. They don't condone it. So if they don't, then it is something that is hurting all of us. We are simply saying, let's address it. Let's address it. To me, to my medics, yes, it is going to take us to provide evidence, because it is us who see the torture victims. Nobody is tortured and doesn't come to hospital. And then to Stella Nyanzi and Kakwenza and yes, the TASO, the hallmark of fighting HIV/AIDS, came as a result of people with similar conditions coming together. You have teamed up in Germany. Just don't take a ride like the president of Ukraine said. It's not about taking rides. Yes, form that organization that we are going to use perhaps to address torture in Uganda. I salute you all. Thank you for listening. And thank you, Henry, for this opportunity. Call me again. You don't need to ask. I'm always ready to talk about torture because it affects me. I fear it. I don't want to be tortured. And to my brothers and sisters at home, be courageous. Let me be picked. And just know that I was talking about torture. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Mr. James William Mugenyi, for this conversation. Thank you so much for engaging in this conversation. We invite everyone who is willing to talk about issues in Uganda. We appreciate your courage, Mr. Mugenyi, for engaging in this conversation. And I would like to appeal to our brothers and sisters in Uganda. Please do not abandon James when he comes to Uganda. Airport. Come and pick him up from the airport so that you can continue those conversations. They are probably you'll probably enjoy them better when you are on that drive from Kampala from Entebbe to Kampala, or wherever you decide to have your vacation from. Again, my name is Henry Ssali. This is the State of the Nation. I want to thank each and every one of you for following us, for engaging in these conversations. I want to encourage you to ask questions. Write in the comments, share with your friends, and if you can, call us. Tell us what you want to listen to. On a weekly basis. Next Sunday, I hope to bring together another exciting panel. I'm hoping that I'll be able to bring Mr. Kakwenza and Stella Nyas to tell us about their ordeals and how they are evolving in life in the diaspora. So stay tuned, share with your friends, subscribe or Silike. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Henry Ssali. Have a great Sunday.
This is the State of the Nation. Rifa Mwanga. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The State of the Nation with Henry Ssali.